all know we cannot afford another 4 years of this. And we must win decisively the long-fought battles for justice and dignity. Whatever your reasons for being here, we're excited to share with you the single most effective way to have an impact on the 2020 elections and beyond. The Movement Voter Project strategy is simple and powerful. Win in 2020 by focusing on the most critical states and build political power for long-term change. And to do this by turning out youth and people of color in particular, and to ensure turnout by funding local organizations, engaging their own communities in the issues they care most about. From The Nation to the New York Times to Forbes, people are writing about MVP. It's clear there is no smarter place to invest in change. But how do those of us with privilege, or those caught in the electoral backwaters of blue states, best help to turn the country blue?
Tonight, in about 20 minutes, we want to discuss the old traditional answer of the Democratic Party and how MVP wins. We'll discuss our emphasis on turnout and local organizing groups and how MVP invests strategically in this work. We'll also tell you a bit about MVP's track record. And finally, we'll get to how you can help and get involved in this great work. First, what's the traditional approach? Historically, candidates parachute into communities. They raise or bring their own millions, even billions of dollars. And between now and November, campaigns will continue to ramp up advertising, the vast majority of it negative. This is really all they can do when parachuting in at the last minute. In the 2016 election cycle, $4.5 billion was spent on TV ads. And every election year, campaigns also rent offices, fill them with furniture and equipment, hire and train staff, and build up management and culture, all from scratch. With traditional campaigns, our donations are a drop in the bucket. The 2016 Clinton campaign spent $768 million. Now, let's take a minute to listen to Tony Mack, the New England State Advisor for MVP, talking about when the transience of traditional political campaigns really hit home for him.
In 2017, I was doing research trying to understand what had happened in 2016 and what needed to change. I kept hearing the term sandcastle. And what the people who used that term meant was that every 2 years, whenever there was a high-stakes election, the Democratic Party would sweep in and they'd build up short-term campaign structures, which these folks were calling sandcastles because they would wash away as soon as the election was over. And 2 years later, they need to start building all over again from scratch. Traditional campaigns like these leave no infrastructure behind to build on for the next election, let alone any groundwork for long-term change.
MVP wins by making sure that those voters who are too often failed by the Democratic Party actually turn out and vote. Here you see a comparison of those who didn't vote in 2016 to Trump's margin of victory that year in MVP's Big Five states. That is, those states most likely to determine the 2020 election. Stacked in different shades of light blue are the number of non-voting Blacks, Latinos, and Asians. In dark blue are represented the non-voting youth, those under 30. And in red, you can see Trump's paltry margin of victory in each state. MVP wins by ensuring that more people of color and youth are engaged in our democracy and that they vote. Let's take a closer look at 2 states with large Latino populations today and see what a difference on-the-ground organizing made between the midterm elections of 2014 and 2018. In Arizona, turnout was up in predominantly non-Latina precincts. It increased by 35% over the previous midterms in 2014. But turnout in predominantly Latino precincts increased by 52%. As a result, Arizona Democrats flipped a U.S. Senate seat and welcomed Senator Kristen Sinema. They also gained a U.S. House seat and 4 state legislative seats. In Texas, the disparity was even greater. Non-Latino precincts increased 43% over 2014, but Latino precincts increased 128%. As a result, Democrats flipped 2 U.S. House seats and came very close in 2 other races, and they flipped 2 Senate seats, state Senate seats, 10 state House seats, and Beto O'Rourke came within 2.6% of unseating an incumbent Ted Cruz, all in red Texas. Here you see party preference over time by voters under 30, dating back to 2000. As you can see, investing in youth, Turnout provided particularly big returns in 2018. In those midterms, youth preferred Democrats by a historic 2-to-1 margin.
MVP boosts turnout, and we do so by funding outstanding organizing groups that are doing electoral turnout work. But what makes a group an MVP group? The people, of course. But what do all MVP groups have in common? 1, they are of, for, and led by those who are experiencing the greatest impact of injustice. Their leaders of MVP groups come from their own communities. 2, MVP groups are the very best at turning out voters. They know their community and their community knows them. They use proven techniques and the latest tools and best practices. 3, MVP groups are trusted messengers, not candidates and not operatives who just arrived in town for a campaign. 4, they aren't only focused on 1 or 2 races or only the upcoming election, they build community and political power for the long term. 5, and when the election is over, MVP groups will be there to hold elected officials accountable. 6, MVP groups use the issues that their members care about most to engage people in elections. They use both local issues and local movements, like today's ubiquitous uprisings against systemic racism. They also use the energy of each election to engage people in the most pressing issues and empower people and groups for whom power is long overdue. And finally, MVP groups aren't just working for a single candidate or race. They fight up and down the ballot, turning people out for ballot initiatives, for reform-minded district attorneys and city councilors, for state house races, Congress, and yes, the White House. For all these reasons, MVP-funded groups are at the core of everything we do. They will receive 100% of your donations from this event.
MVP supports these groups in 3 key ways. With direct support, yes, dollars and grants, but also connections to major donors and to the technology tools and platforms they need in the field. MVP also supports with capacity building, one of Tony's main projects these days. State advisors conduct needs assessments, and then they connect groups to high-quality capacity building consultants. MVP ensures that groups get training on current best practices and on how to get the most out of those technologies and tools. MVP also fosters collaboration. It supports statewide collaboratives and helps with alignment and coordination of the groups. And we invest in leadership, talent development, and in candidate pipelines. 60% of MVP's funding in the 2020 cycle has gone to these big 5 battleground states thus far. Here's just a sampling of the outstanding core partners in these states. If any of you know these states' landscapes well, you'll know these groups, like the FRRC in Florida that is leading the fight on felon reenfranchisement, or LIT, Leaders Igniting Transformation, whose heroic work in the April pandemic election in Wisconsin you are about to see. More than 300 organizations will get MVP funding in the 2020 election cycle. MVP funds the most effective and proven techniques. Those you see here in the yellow box. Randomized control studies by the Analyst Institute have shown that these warm, personal, person-to-person relational strategies work far better than traditional advertising and outreach. Mail and phone and text strategies building on personal contacts, and most importantly, pledge cards and cell phone address book-based relational networking platforms that MVP's been rolling out and groups are getting very good at using them. MVP groups have pivoted quickly to virtual organizing in the face of the pandemic. And MVP has doubled down on our support with more grants and new technology investments. We're making sure that groups have the different tools, training, and best practices they need. Groups have shifted their focus to vote by mail and ballot chase, and they're emphasizing early voting and pivoting from traditional door knocking to digital virtual means like peer-to-peer texting, phone banking, and yes, Zoom meetings like this. And groups are also attending to the needs of their communities that are, per usual, shouldering more of their fair share of the burden of the pandemic. Now, let's hear from leaders in transformation about the work they did in the pandemic leading up to the April 7th election in Wisconsin. This is a video these youth created in the aftermath of this historic outpouring.
This election was not an easy one. In fact, it was still held during a global pandemic in which thousands of people lost their lives. The delayed action by Governor Evers, combined with Republican leadership and forcing voters to the polls during this pandemic, undoubtedly put thousands of people at risk of contracting the coronavirus. Yes, we are angry about the tens of thousands of disenfranchised voters of color, but we are more angry at the political leaders who turned this from an election to an execution. In response to the coronavirus, we pivoted to a digital-first organization to protect the safety of our staff and members. While we have always incorporated digital organizing into our work, we are an on-the-ground organization at heart. Every day, we build with and for young people around Wisconsin in 14 high schools, 9 college campuses, and in communities of color. It was not easy, but we were able to transform our organization in a matter of days, to still engage with young people and communities of color throughout Wisconsin. Our impact on digital platforms led to our content being seen 2,332,205 times on different social media platforms. Our content reaching almost 891,417 people in Wisconsin. Our content directing 19,807 people to request an absentee ballot. And videos watched 332,347 times advocating people to vote yes for MPS and how to request an absentee ballot. Our digital impact was backed up by our canvassing team and staff as we switched to peer-to-peer texting and call campaigns. The real winner is Wisconsin's future. Because in some of our darkest moments, young people of color stepped up and showed that they have the leadership to move the state forward.
The election this video features is the 2020 Wisconsin Supreme Court special election. What you're seeing here on the left is the type of thin conservative margin we've typically seen in these Wisconsin Supreme Court elections, this one from 2019. But this year, as a result of LIT and other great Wisconsin organizations, the liberal candidate beat a many decades incumbent by an astounding 11% margin. MVP's strategy is focused, first and foremost, on the presidential race. Change the president and the crisis begins to abate. Here, in dark blue, you see the big five again, and in a lighter blue, the second-tier presidential states, and in the lightest blue, the keys to flipping the Senate, now within grasp. You can see that some of these priorities overlap in striped states. Well, first, let's listen again to Tony Mack, now MVP's New England State Advisor, talking about how he first discovered MVP and vice versa.
The way I met the Movement Voter Project was that in 2016 I was working with several groups that were organizing voters in marginalized communities, mostly immigrant communities, in Manchester, Nashua, and other urban areas in New Hampshire. These were hard to reach and low turnout voters that no other campaign was reaching out to. MVP discovered early on what we were doing. They believed in us, and they provided us with crucial funding that allowed us to take our organizing to scale. MVP ended up funding over 50% of our overall campaign budget, and this allowed the groups to knock on over 50,000 doors. As a result of that, Maggie Hassan won her Senate seat by 1,027 votes. Without Maggie Hassan's vote in the Senate, John McCain's thumbs down would not have mattered, and Obamacare would be gone.
MVP has assembled an incredible dream team, including 15 former executive directors of groups. Our state advisors are on the ground in 11 key states. They are senior organizers with hundreds of collective years of experience. They know the groups they serve, and the groups know them because they've been working together for years. And they get to work with amazing groups. Let's listen again to Latasha Brown, pictured here with her co-founder, Cliff Albright of Black Voters Matter, as she talks about how MVP's recognition and investment helped supercharge her amazing organization.
2017, there was an Alabama race with Doug Jones and Roy Moore. We were able, with the help of MVP and particularly Billy Wimsatt and connecting us relationship, we were able to raise $200,000 in 9 days. What we were able to do is, through our partnership with MVP, we funded 32 organizations in Alabama, and you know the history, you know the outcome. A seat that had been held by a Republican for over 20 years had now been flipped and was held by a Democrat in the most unlikely place in Alabama. Because we had resources, we were able to get them quickly, disperse them quickly with the relationships we had, and people did the work. And so in 2018, that gave us this framework for 2018 for us to scale up, and we were able to scale up quickly. As a result, we were able to distribute almost in 2018 $1 million to 120 groups throughout the seven states. MVP was instrumental in creating the opportunities for us to build relationships with funders, to really be able to give us resources, but also support, strategic support, technical support, and to really be able to sharing space with other partners that are part of the network. MVP has been essential in the success of us being an emerging organization to becoming an established organization in less than 2 years.
So that's what Latasha and other incredible MVP organizing groups like hers are doing. But what can you do to support this work? MVP is here for donors and donor organizers like you and me. Our nationwide network of experts have their finger on the pulse of what is happening in the field. We've identified and vetted the groups in the most important places and are supporting and strengthening them in their collaborations. We've assembled these groups into funds so you can invest in what you value most. And we hold these groups accountable as partners with planning, reporting, and regular evaluation. Our donations that were drops in the bucket to a candidate go a lot further with these groups. The $125,000 average cost of just airing a single 30-second ad, not even counting production costs, could fund 2 full-time, year-round organizers.
Founded just in 2015, but notably before the Trump election, MVP had raised, actually moved, $2 million by the end of 2016. We say moved because MVP measures its success by how much money its donors send to the groups they fund in the field. MVP raises the funding for its internal operations separately. 100% of your donations from this event will go directly to the groups in the field. For 2017 and 2018, MVP set the audacious goal of raising $10 million and raised and moved $14 million. For 2019 and 2020, we set our goal at $30 million, but last November, with a full head of steam, we raised that goal to $50 million. And in early August, we announced that we had blown through that goal as well, obviously because this work resonates with so many of us. So we've now raised our goal yet again to $75 million, but the real identified need is closer to 150.
Of course, you can help by giving, and we hope you will. But you can also host an event like this to spread the word. Or you can become an organizer, a donor organizer, organizing your network of contacts to support this work, the same way our groups organize their communities to participate in our democracy.